the Fair, thank you, Jess, for the Fair Start for Kids Temporary Licensing Subcommittee virtual meeting. Please remember to mute your phone and your computer upon entry if you have not done so. And I'd like to remind everyone of a few meeting protocols. Thank you, Jess. And as I fumble through this for my first time, please bear with me. Audio and video connection throughout the webinar. Please mute yourself unless you are speaking or responding to a question. We do have Q&A portions dedicated throughout the meeting, but feel free to use the chat box to post questions or comments at any time. If for any reason you place a call on hold and music begins to play, your call will be disconnected. You are more than welcome to rejoin the meeting once you are available again. And individuals using a webcam or video option will be displayed throughout the meeting. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat box, or you can send us an email at the appropriate email there. So before we hop in, I would like to review today's agenda and give you a slight update on a modification of how the flow will transgress through this meeting and then forward with the recommendation report. So as you all know, we're at the final stages of the recommendation report. We're going to be addressing 3 specific recommendations in this meeting and asking for your feedback on those recommendations. We do have draft recommendations to make. These are based on your feedback from previous meetings. And so again, we're going to be asking for additional information related to that. We'll do each recommendation individually. We'll have the recommendation up on a Jamboard, and then we'll ask each of you to place your recommendations on the Jamboard using the sticky note function. In addition, we're open to some verbal discussion if there's any need for that particular topic. And then we'll transgress through those 3 items. On the original agenda, I did say that we would take a break, and then we would review and approve the final recommendation report. That is not the correct step forward. After we finish today, I will take those final recommendations and I will incorporate them into the draft report as it is now. It's maybe 95% complete. I will then send you, as in committee members, in addition to Elac and provider supports, I will be sending the recommendation report out to all of you as a draft for your additional feedback, edits, and ultimate approval. You will have until basically Monday morning. My goal for getting the report to the next step is going to be end of day, Monday, October 24th. And that will give you through Friday, through the weekend. I know before I said it, you'd have like about a day or so, a day and a half, but this should give you plenty of time to hopefully get through this report, because it's very important that this comes from your voice. And I do believe what's reflected in there does come from your voice. So it'll be nice to hear your additional feedback on top of that. Once that feedback is back to me Monday, I will then finalize the report that will then be sent on to our public affairs team. From there, there's a few steps in terms of editing and processing and formatting that the report will go through until ultimately it's sent off to Secretary Hunter. We do have that timeline of December 1 for that needing to be sent to Secretary Hunter. We might miss it by a bit, but it shouldn't be too far off. In hindsight, if we ever had to do this report again, I think we would be able to have this at the final step a little sooner in the process, hopefully to meet that deadline now that we know it exists. So with that, we'll hop into, actually, are there any questions? Does anybody have any question related to that? I do appreciate the silence. That means I know you're all listening. So we'll hop into reviewing the feedback loop. We did not have a chance to get this sent out early. This was my first time doing the feedback loop, but we did capture one element into the actual document. And what we'd like to do, Jess, if you could throw that in the chat.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you very much. This is one of those where I should have told Jess I was going to ask her to do that, so she would have known and been ready. Thank you, Jess. I will give you all just a quick moment to open and review. Wonderful. So as you review that, we can move into introductions. And since we do have a fairly small group, I thought it would be nice if everyone was to introduce themselves verbally. If you're more comfortable introducing yourself in chat, that is totally fine. If you could share your name, where you're located, whether you're a center provider, family home provider, FFN provider, public attendee, or staff. And I will leave it open to anyone who would like to begin.
Good morning. I am Colleen Condon. I am in Spokane, Washington, and I own a center. Eric, would you like me to call on the next person, or are we just...
I think it'd be great if you were to call the next person. And ironically, I was going to choose you because you were really the only one that I was familiar with. So thank you for going first.
You're very welcome. I guess, Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Maybe.
Well, I can introduce Rebecca, I know. Rebecca is also a center owner in Spokane, Washington.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. How about Alondra?
Good morning. My name is Alondra Lucatero. I'm located in Yakima, and I am a center provider.
Thank you, Alondra. Welcome. How about Lorena?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Lorena Miranda. I'm from the Yakima area, and I'm a licensed child care provider.
Thank you for being here, Lorena. And Susan Brown?
Oops. Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Kids Co. We're a multi-site licensed child care provider in the Seattle area.
Thank you, Susan. And Ida? Hope I got that right.
Yes, you did. My name is Ida Rodriguez. I'm a family child care provider in Blaine, Washington.
Thank you for being here, Ida. And Berta?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Berta Tiga. I'm from the Tri-City, Washington. I live in Pasco. I'm family child care provider.
Thank you, Berta. And thanks for everyone being here. I appreciate your taking the time to help us land this plane. I did want to open it with speaking like a captain in the cockpit and seeing if that got a laugh, but then I was afraid I wouldn't get a laugh. That wouldn't be a very good way to start this. So we'll keep it very traditional. Next, we'll move to our Mentee question. And Jess will put the Mentee link in chat, please. We'd like to know what is your favorite fall activity? Maybe no one's into fall. Love it. All three, great. I especially like the sleep. It's very surprising how dark it is in the morning as we're all arising. Some of you are probably up much earlier than I. Nice, getting back into reading. That's a good time. And your son's football games. Oh, that's fantastic. That's a lot of fun. I wish him well on his season. Okay, great. It looks like we may have just about everyone has told us what their favorite fall activity is. I guess we did not introduce ourselves as a staff we have here. I'm Eric LaFontaine. I'm with the community engagement team. And Jess, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Jessica Spencer. I'm in the Tri-Cities and on the community engagement team as well.
Thank you, Jess. And Erin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Kerrigan. I'm the Community Engagement Administrator here at DCYF. Sorry for not being on camera. I will hop on camera in a little bit, but I'm just here listening in to offer any support or answer any questions that might come up. Don't mind me.
Erin is my parachute. If I completely start failing and the whole meeting derails, then I have Erin there to step in and save me. So I don't anticipate that. I think that, again, that I've read this document so many times, and it's good and solid. And so I'm looking forward to your feedback here at the end. Okay, with that, we will hop into one of our first recommendations that we'll be reviewing. Jess, thank you very much. The recommendation itself is to incentivize providers to accept WCCC subsidies. DCYF should increase subsidy payments to 100% now and identify a goal for family participation. For providers who participate in early achievers, increase payments and create a financial incentive for achieving a 3.5 rating. DCYF also needs to make funding more equitable between regions. So we did have one piece of feedback here, and what we're hoping to see is a little more context to this. So maybe take 10-15 minutes here in the group, and using the sticky note function, if you could please provide some additional feedback to this recommendation. And then I think it's appropriate if verbally you want to talk about this. That's also a fantastic way, I think, to vet through some of these ideas. So with that, I will stop talking and let you all dive into your recommendation.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you
So
can.
the way I read this, I read it as all providers can accept WCCC subsidies, whether they're doing early achievers or not. But for early achievers participants who have this rating, they would get a higher reimbursement. Is that the intent of this recommendation?
Well, you know, I hate to say this, I don't know, to be completely honest. I know we don't have anybody on staff here with licensing either that I guess could answer that. Anyone that I guess has been in this previous conversation, are there other members here that can provide some context to that. Obviously, we want to make sure we clean that up, right? If that is the case, then we need to reword this.
Well, because there's some other recommendations from this group saying, you know, for instance, that we make early achievers optional and we go back to minimum licensing requirements, which would fit with this recommendation, sort of. So, I mean,
Right.
what we don't want to do is have contradictory recommendations. So this should actually say that to incentivize providers to accept working connection childcare subsidies, all licensed providers are able to, whether they're early achievers or not. That's the only thing that's going to move that needle.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have anything to share?
Yeah, in looking at this, I mean, no, I'm not at all saying that I don't support this, but is this really a licensing recommendation when we're talking about working connections, or is this not maybe the only recommendation that's kind of going outside of that area? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. It obviously, since WCCC is subsidy, it almost seems like this is a subsidy recommendation. There are additional licensing recommendations within the actual report. And so I think a lot of that could potentially be clarified when I send this final out to you all. The language with the early achievers is, as far as I can recall, there are a few other recommendations related to early achievers. Okay. And again, to make sure we don't really dive off the cliff here, what I want to make sure and do is, you know, work through these individually. And then instead of me kind of starting to fumble through and say, here's all the early achievers recommendations, I think it'll be really good for you all to have the report, have the draft, right? You can read it at your own speed and you can mark the dickens out of it, right? Yeah. That's the intent, is again, we want this thing to be just perfectly buttoned up for when we send it on to the next.
Yeah.
So
I have a question, sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Colleen, just to clarify for me, is your comment / question more about the scope, like, you know, the scope of the recommendations and if it's okay to include something? Yeah, I'm seeing nod. Okay. And I haven't been present for all these conversations, but I do know that at least towards the beginning, there was some sort of, maybe decision isn't the right word, but conversation of being maybe okay with being a little squishy with the scope and including issues that might not be directly related to the task at hand, but, you know, connected. So, but my instinct is to say, ultimately, that's up to you guys. If you want to keep it super buttoned up within like the black and white ink of the scope, we can do that. But my personal opinion is you don't necessarily need to do that. If it all kind of fits in with the general narrative of the report, I think it's okay to include it.
That's a good answer.
But isn't it true right now that if you are not an early achievers participant, you are ineligible to receive working connection childcare subsidized kids?
I believe that is currently the case, yes.
Yes, that is the case.
So then this statement would literally not move the needle at all, because all you're saying here is that for providers who participate in early achievers, they're going to either get 100% of the market rate or something more, but it doesn't talk about the rest of the centers that are just licensed that don't accept working connections. Do you see what I'm saying?
That was my question. I raised my hand. That's exactly the same thing. Because when you apply for your license, if you don't have, or if you have a certain amount of time to participate in early achievers, and if you don't, then you are not able to accept subsidized children. And that's one of the things that is stopping a lot of providers from getting subsidized children. we just had a meeting with SEIU on Saturday, and we had new providers that from the Yakima area. And we were talking about the incentives and things like that to improve the quality of care and to help providers do all of these things that DCYF is asking. But the thing is that they're asking for stuff that sometimes is hard for them, and also parents are having a hard time getting their kids into subsidy, even though they have a minimum wage or low income. So we're going back and forth with the same thing. We have providers and we have the kids that are subsidized, but they can't take them because they don't have early achievers. And then vice versa, we have providers that can take subsidized children, but parents don't qualify.
That's really good. Yeah. You know, as I hear some of this feedback and the discussion, would it make are you wanting early achievers, or the recommendation would be that early achievers should receive subsidy? Is that correct? No. Okay.
It's a clarifying question. So are you, I think I'm following what you guys are saying. Do you think the wording just needs to be adjusted to make it clearer, or do you think that the actual recommendation needs to be adjusted to make it fit in with the context? Just so I'm clear. Is it the recommendation itself that you want to tweak, or is it just not being communicated clearly enough within the context of the other recommendations?
Well, it's a little bit contradictory to one of the other recommendations, which was to roll back to minimum licensing standards, as that is the first thing you need to meet in order to receive subsidies.
Okay.
You know, because the only way to increase participation is to open the door further. And right now, if early achievers is the only door you can walk through to accept subsidies, we're never gonna meet this objective, which is to increase participation
Makes sense.
in subsidies. It just won't happen.
Right. So would you suggest, do you have language that you want to share for us to just do like a real-time edit, or as Eric mentioned, this could also be something submitted in writing, but I want to make sure that we're clarifying that. So
yeah, I think, wasn't it last time that we went through and made, or I might be getting meetings mixed up, but last time we actually sat down and actually edited the document in real time together. Was that this meeting? Does anybody else remember that?
It might have been. We do that with a lot of our work groups. So I'm sure you've been in at least one or two meetings where that's happened, Susan. And I think we could probably do that now. Eric could probably do a screen share and we could just kind of chop it up in real time.
I'm good with that. Yeah. Hold on.
Helpful call out, you guys. Thank you.
Yes.
So maybe the first sentence should be to incentivize providers to accept working connection childcare subsidies, meeting the minimum licensing requirements is the baseline to participate, or something like that.
To incentivize all providers to meet the minimum licensing requirements. Is that what you said?
No, to incentivize providers to accept working childcare subsidies. Oh, I'm going to actually write it and then I'll put it in the chat.
So
okay.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely.
So
And,
I just want,
go ahead,
oh, sorry,
Colleen.
go ahead, Eric.
No, go. I would just say, anybody else that has additional feedback, feel free to drop sticky notes in there, you know, as we're kind of vetting through this conversation. So back to you.
I'm terrible about writing my thoughts on a sticky note that's shared on a Jamboard, so I'll apologize in advance that I'm going to unmute and talk. But I'm thinking here too is that I said it in the chat already, but the original recommendation is reading is three very separate things to me that don't necessarily function together always. And if we're going to hone in on this, like increasing working connections to be available to more providers, I think that we really do need to dig into the EA requirement of that. And maybe our recommendation is not to, you know, obviously to do away with early achievers, because I think we all can agree that's not likely to happen, but more have an impact on that timeline. Because if you are a brand new provider, you are just opening your business doors today, you can get working connections childcare, and don't totally quote me on the dates, but from my recollection, for 2 years while you work on the process. And then at the 2-year mark is when you have to have met certain things. You could lose your subsidy payments at that point in time if you don't work on, or you're not completing that part of it. But also there have been like work plans and stuff like that put in place to kind of give a little bit further grace. Obviously, COVID impacted a lot of those things. And many providers still have not done an early achievers rating, but are getting working connections payments. So I'm wondering if this group would like to focus this recommendation more on that timeline for early achievers, and if we think that 2 years is enough time, or if we want to just say, because working connections also includes bumped rates for early achievers participation. So we could call out and say that we want to have a rate that is just for minimum licensing standards, and then have those other rates. We could also capture that 3.5 part in that right now you don't get a bump in your rate if you've achieved a 3.5. So you are still getting the level 3 rate increase of 8% and not getting the increase of, I believe, 15% if you've achieved a level 4. So I think it's kind of calling out that half step should have another rate bump. And actually in DCYF's documents, it's written out as if there's a bump there. It just didn't get funded. So then when you look at the rates, they're the same as the 3rd tier. I'll be quiet now.
Okay.
I put draft language in the chat.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. Let's grab that. Can you guys see the screen okay? I know with the purple and the white font, it might be a little weird. And the only reason why it's like that's it's a DCYF formatting.
Can you just increase the size of the document?
Yes, I can. Let me grab yours here.
Well, I mean, does anybody have any feedback on what I wrote?
There, I popped that first one in.
So my only feedback, Susan, would be that is anybody recommending that there is an alternate to early achievers? Because this just says, and I understand that that is, you know, in fact, the point, but we recommend eliminating participation in early achievers, but it doesn't speak to if there's any quality standard that has to be met, other than like minimum licensing requirements.
Yeah, in the recommendation that we wrote that talks about rolling back to minimum licensing standards and making early achievers optional. That's, you know, because when I've asked folks within DCYF, and I will not name names, but like, why were there so many problems with licensing and children being harmed or hurt or anything before early achievers? Why did we move to early achievers? You know, because was there a big, and then the answer was no, we didn't have quality issues or whatever. But we read all this research that said, oh, things like teachers should have degrees and thus and such. So we moved in that direction. And from my perspective, and there's more to that story, but from my perspective, that's not a good enough reason to enforce a bunch of unfunded mandates that came out of early achievers. So I believe in quality, and I think that we've said many times that none of us is going to do anything to put our children at risk, because that puts our businesses at risk. And so this idea that we need to be micromanaged and everything dictated to us through early achievers is not necessary and it's overreach. So the quality, I mean, there wasn't a quality issue to begin with. It was more about what's the latest research and wow, we want to be on, you know, on board that train. That's what I understood. But, you know, that's also, you know, one person's perspective from DCYF and my recollection of that conversation.
Ida, I see you have your hand raised.
So no, Rebecca, definitely not another program that needs to vet us. Definitely not. Early Achievers has done more than enough to do that. We're already over-regulated to begin with. And all this new regulation that came down the turnpike was no funding attached to it, and the modifications we had to do to our programs in order to meet those needs. I found myself, and I'm just giving you lived experience here, that I didn't want to turn away low-income families because we were perpetuating communities of color to live in poverty and not have access to quality childcare by not accepting it. So inadvertently, DCYF created the circle of doom that you couldn't get out of if you were subsidized, receiving subsidized care within any funding structure. So I am an EA participant, but at the same time, there's many high quality programs that don't participate in early achievers who don't have access to provide subsidized care, which then impacts our communities of color not having the same access to that quality ran program. So if we could, you know, make it voluntary early achievers, whether you do it or not, and then you have access to that additional funding to then build your program, implement those best practices and high standards of education, then that should be a choice. It shouldn't be attached to this funding stream. So yeah, I think that's where I stand with that one, but not another program to come in and decipher whether I'm good quality or not, especially with my track record, if that makes sense. Like Susan mentioned, there wasn't anything that was impacting the decision of that prior. Like there was no definitive factors of children being unsafe or harmed or hurt to early achievers being implemented. I'm not going to complain. I use my early achievers funding to put back into my program and grow it, but it should be a choice. And low-income families should not suffer the consequences of state implementing these types of requirements and not have the same access that kids that can afford to pay for childcare.
Colleen, I see you had your hand up first.
Yeah, Ida, thank you for sharing that. That's really important. And I actually wanted to lean towards capturing what you just shared in our recommendation. So my thoughts were looking at that first sentence that Susan had written. So in an effort to meet the FSKA goal, and then maybe some statement, and these words aren't going to come, the right words aren't going to come out of my mouth right now, but something about an undue the harm or whatever it is that we want to capture what you're saying, because we really did then decrease access for many families because so many providers now can't accept the working connections. So I'm kind of suggesting that we reframe that first statement to capture both. Like, not only do we want to meet the FSKA goal, and maybe that's motivating for some who would work on getting this through, but also capture that inequity that has occurred due to this shift. I think that would be a really valuable add to this recommendation.
Well, and I don't think that was DCYF's intention. I don't think early achievers' intention was that, but ultimately that's what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those programs that came forward, and there were a lot of, hiccups and unintended consequences that occurred with it. I just think we can capture that in this recommendation, not to place blame anywhere, but to say we recognize that occurred, and we think that removing that would help us, start to bridge that gap again.
Well, and then we could really go deep into it, then equities attached to this funding stream attached to that, but not only that, but, religious beliefs, dietary restrictions, all that stuff. I know fully ran vegan childcare programs that don't accept subsidy, but a child of subsidy who struggles with some sort of intolerance to food, that would basically, there's you could go really deep into the impacts this has caused to families and children across the state, but definitely is not provided access to all based on EA being a requirement to access subsidized care.
Rebecca, you still have your hand raised, or no, you dropped it. You must have got your answer.
I was just going to say almost exactly what Colleen said, which was to build on the statement so that it doesn't look like, we just don't want to participate in early achievers, or, that we're trying to toss aside a program that a lot of people have built and a lot of people have grown from, but that we specifically call out that it has created, there was an unintended consequence, like where it says make early achievers voluntary, so that we don't perpetuate the unintended consequences of, of access and, whatever, sorry, I'm also on phones. But, where we can actually build on that statement so that it doesn't look like we're just saying, we don't want to do it anymore. We think it's a bad program, which is in fact not, I don't think what any of us are saying. I think we're saying that there were so many other parts and pieces that were the unintended consequences. And that by making it voluntary, we also can increase, the whole idea of accessibility to centers who choose it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, no, that does. That's excellent. Susan, thank you for your clarification for the additional language in there. I did pop that into the document, so I'll let everyone kind of review. I'm going to leave these 3 on the bottom just until maybe we've determined if they fit or not, and we'll just kind of focus on that intro recommendation there. Colleen, and no need to raise your hand since we're such a small group. If anyone wants to just pop in, feel free, as long as you're of course respecting those that are already talking as best you can. So Colleen.
Thank you, Eric. Please, everybody, don't hate me for being the one that says this, but I am aware that our federal dollars do have a QRIS requirement to them. That is ultimately what gave the basis for early achievers to be created. So I would appreciate Matt Judge's feedback on how we write this recommendation so that how we put it forward is actually something that could move forward instead of us getting stonewalled with well, there's that one little clause in the federal requirements, so now we can't move forward with this recommendation. The thing is that it does not have to be. Washington State went way above and beyond with early achievers. The federal requirement for a quality rating system is a very, very low threshold. It does not have to be early achievers, but we would be required then in our documentation for the federal dollars to articulate what that QRIS is if we don't enforce early achievers. So just having gone into the weeds in many of those conversations before, I'm aware that there will be that. Yes, Susan?
Quick question. So there is no early achievers or requirement for like school age, and we receive subsidies for school age kids. So I'm wondering if that's kind of that overreach in early learning, but more of a typical application of the rule for school age. I'm just, because I don't understand, how is it that one has to be early achievers and the other doesn't?
That's a really good call out, Susan. And I'm not aware of if there's a difference for the age of children being served or anything like that. I think Matt's the one who would probably know the answer to that. I also have a wondering of whether or not Washington State is in compliance with the federal rules when it comes to the school age stuff there, because there are certainly things that Washington has not been in compliance with for the federal requirements. And I do recall there being kind of pre-COVID being a push to incorporate school age into early achievers. So I'm wondering if they used the pandemic as a reason to have not.
There was a
corrected that.
different push, actually. Schools Out Washington was working on something, and I don't
Okay.
remember exactly what it was. But I do hear your point.
Yeah.
And that we should check, but I think, I feel like that sort of using their own, I mean, the application of the rules is not consistently applied, I think.
So true. Yes, thank you, Susan.
Sure.
Very good. Well, to be mindful of the other two recommendations that we're going to need to get through, let's circle back on this revised language now that I have placed in here. How comfortable does everyone feel with this being the starting point, at least from a recommendation standpoint, and then now being able to provide all that feedback that you're talking about? Those are the things that we want to capture in this recommendation. So with that, how does everyone feel about the language, excuse me, with that first sentence?
Eric, there's an extra "the" in there where it says unintended consequences of the should come out. I didn't catch that when I wrote it. Yeah, that's it.
Good catch.
Maybe this is where instead of we recommending eliminating participation, we say we recommend making participation in early achievers voluntary.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm asking the folk, because I mean, this is not about me wanting to eliminate any quality measures. It's not that at all. I just know early achievers is brutal.
Would the statement "we recommend making early achievers voluntary" be a correct statement?
I think it was up there before. I think it was Ida.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, very good. How about though now the remaining statements here? To incentivize all providers to accept WCC subsidies, DCYF should increase subsidy payments to 100% now and identify a goal for family participation. Does that recommendation still remain?
I don't think it fits here.
Okay. I wondered if it kind of got maybe a little misplaced in this. Now, I mean, I guess that if that is a recommendation that the group has, then that could also be its own recommendation. I don't know if that's necessarily appropriate here at the 25th hour, but again, this is really your voice. So I'd like to really make sure we capture that.
I think Colleen's right. It doesn't fit here, and I think it is a good separate recommendation. But I had another thought in terms of, the concern with early achievers. That kind of in this thing where it says, 100% now, but what if we said something along the lines, in addition to this, to incentivize participation in early achievers, we recommend we recommend that early achievers participants with a 3.5 rating are paid at 110% of the whatever, something more like, what could we do to incentivize people to do it? That's a thought that I just had.
Okay. I tracked most of that. Would you be comfortable kind of consolidating that into chat in a brief statement, as you've done with some of the previous ones?
I am typing something to that effect.
Oh yeah.
Eric, and then Susan can edit if she wants.
Thank you much. And then on the to incentivize all providers to accept WCC subsidies, this statement, with it not fitting here in this particular recommendation, would you like that to be its own standing recommendation? Or see if potentially that fits in another recommendation made throughout the document?
I think it could be either of those, because I don't remember what the other recommendations are. We won't know until
Right.
we see
Right.
them.
Until you know, right? Yeah, right. Okay, how about what I'll do is I will take this recommendation, I will make its own. And then I'll leave area for licensing feedback. So when you get this report here at the end of the day, this will be a good opportunity to go in and maybe place some of that feedback into that particular recommendation. Does that make sense? Bet. Love the silence. I know that means that you're agreeing with me. Or agreeing with us. Thank you, Colleen.
Sorry, my chat was doing the thing where I started to edit and then it was like typing over the text I'd already written. So I think I'm missing at least an or the or something somewhere in there.
No, just a comma. How about the language there now on the second bullet? And then I'm going to remove this bottom one, since we're
Colleen,
rewording.
I'm sorry, Eric.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What Colleen just put in the chat about the remaining, do you want to add a sort of an ending that says something like as already reflected
I
in
love your
the,
words. Go for it.
you know what I mean? Because it's already reflected. It's just not funded.
Kind of like this.
Sure.
Okay.
And what's the paper? I have the paper right here. What's it called?
Should we say and fund the rate increase for level?
Yeah,
3.5?
Oh,
I
that's
agree,
good.
Susan. Yeah.
I like that. And fund the license as shown, as already
Mandated.
right.
On this sentence, should I remove should be added? And we have and the
Yes.
fund rate increase.
Yep.
And fund the rate increase for level 3.5 period. Got it. Not period, but
As
an
already
end of-
mandated.
yeah. Okay. Okay. How does everyone feel about this? Just ignore me dropping this up there. Okay. Good. How about the third statement there, this third recommendation? Obviously, that seems applicable for this particular conversation. Would you agree?
This might be where we add, where it says DCYF, something about regions. There's this cost of care study thing that's happening, and I don't know if there's anything yet that says something about DCYF being, you know, because we're using the cost of care estimation model. We're supposedly doing that. And I believe it's supposed to be making things equitable between regions.
Okay.
So am I understanding it? Am I remembering that correctly? Did those who have a better memory than I do about the cost of care thing?
That one I cannot answer. I don't know if maybe anyone in the group might have some
Can you repeat that? What the?
Yeah, there's the Child Care Collaborative Task Force and DCYF did this cost of care study that was conducted by P5 Strategies. And that study uses regional, I mean, we've even talked about going down as far as zip codes on that one. So if we use the cost of, so if DCYF actually adopts the cost of care estimation model like we think they're going to, so maybe the recommendation here would be adopt, like we recommend using regional subsidy payments as recommended or as identified through the cost of care study or something like. I'm just, I feel like because these things keep happening in silos and there's no way to tie them together, it concerns me that we don't reference the other things that are happening that are supposed to solve this problem.
Susan, I think that's a great call out. And I also agree that it makes sense to frame it that way. Something that I'm just Googling really quick right now is what might be available from the Child Care Collaborative Task Force, because I know they're finishing up their recommendations right now. And we just had co-chairs of the task force present at Provider Supports last week, and they were talking about how important the cost of care study was in the development of their recommendations and their work. So I'm just wondering, maybe I'm pulling up the task force website to see if they might even have something that like outlines what you're saying that you guys can just reference directly to.
Yeah, Erin, they do have that recommendation. I don't think it's published on the website yet because other
not till December, I think.
Yeah, but I do have draft language that I was given permission to share at another meeting, and I don't see why I wouldn't then be able to share it here. So give me a minute and I will go digging through all of my versions of things saved on my computer and find what you're talking about. I think I know what
Happy hunting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so
Erin,
I mean,
this is the way you've written it is a good placeholder for it.
and I'm not sure if you guys would agree, but if Colleen has language that the task force has already thrown out there for this, if it works for your purposes, you guys could just, cut and paste it. I'm sure nobody would mind if you repeat their language wherever we can. So, or we can at least use it as a jumping off point. But to your greater point, Susan, I agree. I think like the way you guys are looking at this makes a lot of sense, and continuity is important. And like you said, this work is being done, recommendations and reports are being produced. So we want to make sure we're referencing back to that work that's supportive of what you guys are trying to do here. So completely agree.
This is Lorena. I participated in the cost of care study. And one of the things that I heard from them is that they're still working on the cost of care study, and it's not going to be put out there until probably next year, the beginning of the year, because they're still working on that. So it's going to take a little bit longer for them to have an actual amount of how much it costs for each person to have a childcare or a center, all of that, because it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be put out there. So if we're going to use the cost of care, we might not be able to have a specific amount until I don't know how long.
Thank you. That's good feedback. While we wait for Colleen to grab that and verify that, I did take this updated recommendation and put that back in our Jamboard. And Jess is maybe going to help me try to increase the font on that. It's there, it's just a little small. And I thought maybe it would be appropriate now that we've kind of nailed down this recommendation, you know, in a basic sense, that we could go back to the Jamboard, give you just a few minutes to put some of those additional feedback notes up there, if there's anything more you feel like you'd like to add outside of what we've captured here in the conversation. There we go. Would you guys like to see the Jamboard back on the screen, or are you okay with it, you know, being visible here? And then again, you're going to have this report sent out to you, and that is an appropriate way for you to add additional comments and feedback at that point.
Eric, how would things like if people were putting in their notes about unintended consequences, like Ida was mentioning with regard to like low income, you know, and communities having fewer options for subsidy rates, or even mixed demographic communities, so on and so forth. Is that what will that stuff be incorporated into this document, or you just want it for like backup or something?
Well, so the intent of bringing this question back, because I know that this recommendation obviously had been worked out to some degree previously. So in the last meeting, this item was on the agenda for additional feedback, because there was really only one bullet of feedback, which you can see it's the WCC needs an increase and should be based on what a provider charges. So Emily wanted it to come back and get additional feedback, you know, on that recommendation. That recommendation has now been modified a bit, and so I guess what would be appropriate is maybe if there were additional feedback clarifications related to this recommendation, then we'd like to hear those, if they maybe haven't already been captured in the verbal discussion, which will take us a little time to get through that recording to actually pull those recommendations out and then get them back in the report. And so anything that's provided in writing really is very, very helpful for us as we, try to roll this thing out. And the quicker I get it done, the quicker I can get it all into your hands and allow you all to make those edits. So, but I can do it any way you'd like. I am completely open to making sure that we get this facilitated properly. Does anyone have any?
So Eric, I did find the document that I was given permission to share, and I'm immediately recognizing that the recommendation has evolved from that statement and references the cost of care model and the 25 biennial budget, 25-27 biennial budget. But that document, that version on is not to be distributed, so I want to maintain integrity. So I'm sharing what I said I would share right here, because that I was given permission to share on a slide. But I do think, in just my personal reviewing of both of them, what we have written is sufficient. We could say that we know a recommendation is coming from the Child Care Collaborative Task Force, and that we also agree with that recommendation. I know that's hard to say when not everybody's been given a chance to read the recommendation as it is, but just trying to maintain integrity and all of that, and not share something that I wasn't given direct permission to do so.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Then that third statement, then it sounds like that is fitting. Okay, excellent. And then you can see I just added down in that little bullet, we recognize that a recommendation will be coming from Child Care Task Force. Okay.
Eric, it's the Child Care Collaborative Task Force, just so we make sure they reference the right one. And
not tasked. Child Care.
I didn't even make it that far. I just noticed the missing word.
Let's go spell check, make sure I got that one right. All right, good deal. Okay, wonderful. So for time purposes, what we'll do is we'll leave this recommendation as is. And this will be the way then when this gets sent out to you later on this afternoon, you'll have your opportunity to go in and provide additional feedback on this particular topic. When we get to the end, I'll kind of go through some tips on how you might want to provide your notes and edits in there. Basically, it's any way you want to do it, right? If you want to put a comment on it, if you just want to type right in there and say what you want to say, you know, we'll recognize what's new text, and that'll be most of the information I pull forward. So, all right, excellent. Then why don't we move on to the next recommendation? I'm going to stop screen sharing. Jess, could you throw the Jamboard link back in there, please? And we'll go to slide 2. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jess. Okay. So the recommendation is, and Jess, could you try to make that a little bigger if you can? We request an update on the status of the internal review process panel process. I don't know if that's supposed to be written that way, since some of the providers applied were selected to join, but have not yet been contacted. We do have a few items of feedback that we pulled from last meeting when we did discuss this very, very briefly. What I'd like to do is take the opportunity, again, similar to before, and allow you to first ask questions or clarifications and make sure that you are comfortable with this recommendation. And then once you are, giving you the chance to provide some additional feedback using sticky notes, or even the chat section is completely fine. So with that, does anyone have any questions or clarifications on this recommendation?
It's not really a recommendation. We just, I think people are wondering what in the heck's going on with this thing.
Right, okay.
So would the recommendation be that, from what I understand, nothing's happening with this, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yes. So it's really, the recommendation is that you want an update, right? You'd like an update on participants, who serves, when do they meet, history, and then also the financials, and if the legislation was funded in the decision package. Some of you may have recalled that. Colleen?
Yeah, I agree that this is written as more of a request. I'm wondering if we can add some teeth to it to make it more of a recommendation. So it being that we want a status update on it, and then maybe we recommend that there's a work group or some sort of something that occurs to make sure it's actually being utilized. Because as of right now, like, people who were selected for this panel have yet to be contacted and have not done it. There are others who have also said that it was a pilot panel and then has not been funded since then. So it's just a lot of not clear, concise information on what is happening with this. But I think we could add some teeth to this recommendation too, that we would like then there to be a work group to review what we're asking for, something along those lines.
Okay. Why don't we go in real-time format? And Jess, I'm going to go back to my screen share and I will pull up the recommendation report. And then we'll make sure we just kind of vet through it that way, if everyone's okay with that. Working in real time here. Okay. Can everyone see my screen with the report on there? All right. Okay, excellent. So I've changed the language just a little bit. We request a status update on the internal review panel process, since some providers applied, were selected to join, but have yet to be contacted. We would like there to be a work group. Obviously, I think this needs a little bit more teeth. So I'd like to open that up to you as the group to help me give this some more teeth. And thank you, Rebecca, on the quarterly status update. Excellent. At least quarterly, how about that? Well, we'll just say quarterly. We're not going to say at least. We're going to get very definitive.
And who do we want the status update to go to? Because it's my understanding this group here will be done as a work group once our recommendations are finalized. So I think we should be specific about who we want to be updated quarterly and whether that is this new work group. Apologies in advance, CE team. I'll just perpetually create more work groups and more. It's job security, right?
That's right.
But yeah, if we think that there should be a subsequent work group, then is it that work group that needs to have status updates? Is it Elac, provider supports, parent advisory council that we want to have updates? I think we need to articulate that because unfortunately they would meet our recommendation of updating us quarterly if we were no longer being convened and then they didn't update us.
Yeah, no, that's a really great clarification. Are there any members that could add something to that?
That's
So
the question. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm understanding that this, the status update is only for the groups that are like doing the, or trying to submit this. So it wouldn't be like for all the providers? Or why don't we put that, like it's for like, because I'm pretty sure all providers want to get an update, not just the ones that we're working or know about the information.
Okay.
That makes sense.
What is the internal review panel for?
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to ask that. I'll be totally transparent. I'm not 100% sure. You know, I have a general understanding of what it is. I mean, it's a panel that will review, you know, internal discussions. Erin just stepped away for a second. I don't know if she has any more clarification on that. What I can do is, for purposes of this report, I'll get a definition of the internal review panel, and I'll make sure that when you receive this later on today, that definition will be in there as a note. You'll be able to pull it up, and then I'll find out what that is, and then I'll be able to include that in there. Does that help for now to kind of help facilitate forward, or is that something that you really would like to know more about first before you make the recommendation?
Well, if there's no the purpose of if I understood what the internal review panel process, what it was for, then it might answer if the work group already exists, like within Elac, like, or, you know, belongs to Elac, whatever. I don't know what it's for, so I don't even know what to even say. Does anybody know what it is? Like, what are they reviewing?
If I'm going to go back, I'm going to scroll up a little bit and see where this is in relation to the category that we're in. Try not to. We are in the compensation and provider supports section of the report. I'm not sure if that helps much. And again, I apologize. I won't try to go too fast here, even though that's probably pretty fast. You know what? Let me see if I can get quick clarification on the internal review process.
Like, are they reviewing licensing rules?
I don't know.
I stepped away for a second, so I apologize if this isn't exactly what you're looking for, but so I applied to be on this internal review panel. I wasn't named for it, but it was meant to be another step. So when a provider, asked to appeal a licensing decision and those sorts of things, there was supposed to be an added level that included this panel. The panel had providers on it. It named all sorts of specific seats that were supposed to be on this panel, but I think it had 2 or 3 provider spots, and it was basically supposed to be the next step when there was a licensing decision. So it wasn't really intended to review WAC or licensing type rules, but if a provider brought something forward through that process, then they would have the authority to review those rules and those sorts of things. So that's my recollection from when I applied to be on this panel.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Colleen. Susan, I did scroll down a little bit here, and there is a little bit of context in here. There was a piece of legislation sponsored by Representative Dent that mandated the creation of this. The seats included providers, just as Colleen said. And then what I did to briefly capture Colleen's statement was, it's the next step when a provider asks for an appeal on a licensing decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with that now that we've clarified that a little bit, kind of working back into that main recommendation, you can see that I've added a little bit more teeth to it. We would like there to be a work group. The update should be provided to Elac. The updates should be provided to all providers. The only reason why I separated those was because I know that when the recommendation report is finalized and it's sent off to where it's going to go, that there will be a feedback loop closure with this document. And that's something that I asked for, that so when the group will know what recommendations were implemented, and for those that weren't, there will be answers as to why. You'll know why those didn't fit or whatnot. So some of that will help, I think, on the update side, like with where we bring this back to. My assumption is that it will come back into Elac as the main body, and then from there, depending on where it would need to be, communicated out, then I think that would be appropriate for them to make that decision. Some of you might even be on Elac. Susan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so then that, to me, then the quarterly part doesn't apply to this first update. We just want to know what the status of the process is in general.
Yeah. Okay.
And then quarterly updates from the work of the panel should be provided to Elac.
Got it. Okay.
And the providers.
Yeah.
Is that, that's what I think what we meant.
Anyone else have anything to share? Including Elac. Okay. So then now I removed, we request a status update on the IRP process, since some providers applied, were selected to join, but have yet to be contacted. We would like there to be a work group. The update should be provided to Elac. Quarterly updates should be provided to all providers, including Elac. Does anyone have anything to add? Is everyone comfortable with that recommendation? And if you'd like, a thumbs up would work. And if you have some further questions, then feel free to raise your hand or just hop right in.
I'm not clear on what the work group's for.
Colleen, maybe would you like to expand a little on that idea of a work group? Maybe a little bit more teeth to it, and I can get that included.
Yeah, so my thought on the work group, so we could choose, like, we don't have to stick with work group in there if everybody's just comfortable with the updates to Elac. My thought around the work group was to name that we want something active to be happening with this group. So I guess the work group would have been I don't know how the words that are coming to me are like a review panel of the review panel. In a sense, where there was going to be a group that was going to dive into, I mean, I know there had to have been rulemaking or something that happened. Like if Dent did get legislation passed that called for this to happen, then DCYF internally did rulemaking on what this group was going to be, but like nobody knows what happened or why it's not currently happening. So I threw out the idea of a work group just as like to give teeth to something that we're actually asking to happen instead of just asking for an update. But the group could also choose to just say like the quarterly updates are sufficient.
Yeah, because what's missing is accountability.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So I said a work group, yeah, I wanted there to be accountability to it. So feel free to like scratch the idea of a work group if we feel like there's a better way of doing that.
What if the work group language was added to the Elac sentence? So the update should be provided to Elac, comma, who can then determine or define a further work group opportunity, you know, something along those lines. Or would you just like work group just not even included at all?
What if we said something along the lines that we recommend that accountability measures be put in place to hold the internal review panel process? I mean, you know, we recommend that accountability measures be put in place. I'm not sure what I'm saying, but
Keep
I
going,
don't know
you're
that
riffing.
I'm concerned about the work group thing from the standpoint of we already do a lot of volunteering our time. And I just don't think people have the bandwidth to volunteer more time.
So Susan, what about doing the update should be provided to Elac and determination should be made within that group of how to
Hold them accountable.
Yeah, how to ensure accountability for the internal review panel.
I think that's good.
Yeah. So that way we're saying that it's not another work group that needs to be created yet. Elac, and Elac has teeth to it as far as voting and those different things. So Elac could spend the time to put in the accountability measures.
I think that's a good idea.
So I will say who will determine the accountability measures. Okay. I will give you a moment to read through the revised language.
Eric, I feel like where you added that who will determine accountability measures maybe means we don't need the sentence before. So I think we can maybe cut out the we recommend that accountability measures are put in place. Instead, the update should be provided to Elac, who we recommend determine accountability measures. I think you can take out the word will after recommend.
Okay. All correct. Why didn't you get measures? Okay. How's that? I'll give you all a moment to digest. Okay, very good. With a show of thumbs up, is everyone comfortable with the recommendation? Excellent. Okay, wonderful. And then what we'll do, as with the other one, when this document is sent out here at the end of the day, I'll make sure and kind of notate, the 3 recommendations that we really dove into. So that way, as you're going in and providing additional feedback, maybe something, between now and then comes up that you'd like to include, and that would be a good opportunity to obviously give this report a little more teeth. The more feedback you can provide on every recommendation is really going to be valuable to those that are going to see this report and then take it and actually implement some of the pieces to it. So, okay, 10:30. How's everyone doing on time? Does anyone need a break, or we really only have one more recommendation to work through? Is everyone comfortable with just hopping to that next recommendation? All right. Love when I see all those thumbs. Okay, Jess, let me stop sharing. If you could please put us back into, there we go. Thank you very much. And if you could possibly make that a little larger, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so the last recommendation is related to the rulemaking petition process. We actually don't really have much of a recommendation here. The intent was to call out that you did not receive a presentation per your request, and that you recommend the following. It could be as simple as the other, where you're recommending that there is a presentation. And maybe this would be a good opportunity as well for those that are maybe a little more comfortable with typing recommendations. Then you could place those in the chat and I can copy and paste those into here, or you're welcome to use the sticky notes on the Jamboard. Or if you just like to work in real time, we can go back to the live document and kind of pop in different elements there. And I'm open to suggestions on what would be preferred by the group.
Is this the petition process like when that father wanted the diaper rule changed? Is that what we're talking about, that process?
Susan, the petition process that you're describing, the dad that submitted the petition about the diaper changing stations, that is one of the rulemaking processes. It's not all of it, but it's one way to initiate the rulemaking process.
So in this statement here, where we did not receive a presentation on the rulemaking petition process, there is more than one petition process?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The petition that you're referring to, that is one way that a petition can be put through the petition process. So, but it's an example of
Okay.
but the whole process is a little more comprehensive than that. There's like other elements to it. So
Okay.
And this is something that Provider Supports has discussed primarily at the end of last year and a little bit in Q1 of this year. I can share what I've heard from providers as far as feedback on this. I don't know if that's helpful.
It's helpful to me because I'm not sure, because I don't know the complexity of this. I don't even know how we would make a recommendation.
Yeah, so, and I'm about to put something in the chat that might be helpful, just, as an FYI. Here we go. But we've had this conversation a couple times with providers, and primarily the feedback that I've heard is not necessarily feedback on the process itself, but more about the engagement piece of that process. So yes, it is true that part of the rulemaking process at DCYF does involve time for public comment and feedback. However, what I was hearing from providers is that they didn't feel like these opportunities to weigh in on these rule changes were being shared widely enough, if they were like accessible enough. You kind of have to go seek it out and kind of track it pretty carefully yourself to know when these opportunities are available. So as far as feedback on that process, that's pretty much like the most specific thing I've heard, just not necessarily changes to the process itself, but wanting that process just to be a little bit more public facing and communicated to providers better. So that's just what I've heard, but that's not to say there aren't elements of the process itself that providers would want to weigh in on, but oh, look, and like those here, the hyperlinks for the.
Okay, so was this the group where we talked about the provider bill of rights?
Yes, that discussion did come up quite extensively in the last meeting. There also is a provider bill of rights recommendation on here, which really was most of the things that were said last meeting were actually kind of previously captured on there. So yes, that is in.
Rebecca put a note in here that did remind me that it isn't just that there were providers who didn't even know they could appeal things on their, when the licensor comes to do the inspection or whatever.
Right, I remember that.
We didn't even know, many providers don't even know they can appeal that process, appeal those conclusions on those reports. So I think that we should have a step-by-step guide for the rulemaking process, but also, how to appeal the decision. And is that where the review panel comes in? This is where I'm like, trying to figure out where, the flow chart.
Yeah.
Susan, that sounds a lot like the things that were being thrown out during the conversation about the petition process is providers wanting, I like the word you use, flow chart, right? So not necessarily diving into the process itself and providing feedback on how that works, but more feedback on how DCYF is sharing that information. And making sure that the rules are clear and the process is clear. So I think that what you're describing, that definitely could fit within the context of a provider's bill of rights, right? Like, I think the term we use for a document like that internally is rights and responsibilities document. That's the kind of.
We wanted the responsibilities word not included because we already know what our responsibilities are. We don't know what our rights are. Okay, so you guys have already talked about that. Sounds good. Yeah, you guys can call it whatever you want. Yeah, so I see those things as being something that would definitely make sense to be included in a document like that. But I also kind of see it as its own ask, right? Because I think independent of the Bill of Rights document, that is something that should exist on the website. So, I mean, but I think either way makes sense. I think it makes sense as like a standalone ask or recommendation, but I also think if you just would rather weave that into the recommendation about the Bill of Rights document, that works too. I just think anything that isn't spelled out now, that is something we should have spelled out, should be like the appeal process, the rulemaking petition process. I've heard from people that when providers submit a petition process, it's often denied, but yet like we get this parent who submits a petition and it's acted upon immediately, and it was not a good recommendation from the parent. Thankfully, we heard about it so that we could prevent something terrible from happening as a consequence of a positive reaction in terms of taking action, when a parent submits a petition, but when a provider does it, it's a no. And so I think that's also some of what's prompting the rulemaking petition process. So how do you arrive at the no versus the let's take action?
Susan, that what you just said piqued my interest. I was not aware of a discrepancy between approval of petitions, kind of provider versus parent. But if that exists, that's something that should definitely be called out. Not a lot of petitions come through. I think, we get, I think it's something like less than 5 a year. So that data should be easy to pull. But if there is a pattern of that, I've not heard that, but that's definitely like, that should be pretty easy to pull up and cite. So I think that should definitely be called out if there is a pattern of that. I can look into that and see if we can pull some numbers.
And Colleen asked in the chat, it looks like to the group, are you asking for transparency on approval/denial records?
I think that's a good idea, because the knowing the reason why and all that context is really important.
So that,
Oh, go ahead, Erin. I'll wait.
Oh, I was just going to say that is publicly available and technically transparent in its current state. But I think that ties into the broader feedback that we've been hearing, is that it's one thing for it to be technically available in public. It's another thing for the agency to, be proactively sharing it out and advertising the opportunity to weigh in, so, but the petition process itself is transparent. If you have questions about why something was denied or approved, that's something that is definitely accessible. But I think what I've been hearing is that DCYF needs to do a better job sharing that out and making it easy to find and participate in.
Yeah, I agree with that, Erin. And I was going to even say, we could say that, so if you're saying there's 5 of those requests a year, that's not too much content for us to say we want all of those that come in to be shared at Elac, whether that's in the feedback loop or actually presented at Elac, whatever. And, the reason why they were approved or denied, or a status update on where they're moving. Maybe we just want that to be an item that is always on that feedback loop. Or I don't know if the group wants to push for it to be a actual meeting topic item, but if there's only 5 of those a year, that's not unreasonable to think that could be maintained in that document. Is the feedback loop super easy for a lot of folks to access? No, I mean, it's there, but you have to know about it, know it's there. So we could also go a step further and have that be shared out in regular DCYF communications. Just a thought.
That's really good feedback.
Yeah,
Colleen.
because I think that the diaper changing rule, didn't we only find out about it because it started to move towards a response that was a rule change?
Yes, yeah, they went to the provider supports meeting to check the box that they had engaged providers, but it was a presentation that was here's what we're going to do with this, not hey, we received this, how should we address this? What would be reasonable? It was just we have to notify you, and we're checking the box of notifying you by coming to this meeting and saying we're doing this.
To clarify, they do not have to come to providers and ask for any kind of feedback on any of these. So there's not a box to check there. All that the DCYF is obligated to do is offer an opportunity for the general public to provide input. So my understanding, and I'd have to pull some of my notes, but from what I understand, that was mostly done as kind of to walk provider supports through an example of how that looks. And it ended up being a good example because the providers did not agree with DCYF's original stance on that. rule change. So it kind of grew into a conversation about the actual petition itself. So, but like the original purpose of of bringing that to provider supports was in response to questions about the process. So it was a way to walk through it. It just happened to be a really good example because it highlighted why it's important to be engaging more actively with the community on these processes, right? Because you guys had a lot to share. But just to be clear, yeah, it has been thrown out in meetings to have provider supports be the venue for that. But hearing what you're saying, Colleen, I think it does make more sense to maybe call Elac out in the recommendations so they can make the determination of whether that would sit with their subcommittee or them. That's kind of an aside, but I just wanted to call that out because I think previous language and call outs on that refer to provider supports as the venue for bringing that, but I do think it's probably the better thing to do to call Elac out and have them determine the delegation there.
Yeah, I definitely support that, Erin. It should go to Elac, and then if Elac determines that they want to involve one of their subcommittees, then they can take it to the subcommittee.
Yeah, no need to overcommit.
And then what I would recommend then is Rebecca's how she wrote it in the thing, the chat, that we recommend a rulemaking process, have a step-by-step guide, because this conversation basically points right directly at that. We don't really know what those things are. And so
exactly.
I think Rebecca's language is well suited for this recommendation.
Great. And I also love that because it's consistent with what the advisory groups have already shared. So just for my own personal internal tracking purposes, I do like that's something we've heard across the board. So I think it is representative of provider voice to include a recommendation like that.
So then,
Okay.
Eric, I think the change to the document is what Rebecca wrote in the chat.
Yes, can you guys not see the document? I meant to share it, but maybe it hasn't even been showing up the whole time.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, now we see it.
Okay, good. Yes, so maybe take a quick moment here. And what I've tried to do is capture a lot of this individually and create some bulleted items. Please take a quick moment and see how accurate I got this, and let's make sure we make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah, but what I meant, Eric, is that Rebecca's language should be the recommendation. That we did not, I mean, I don't know if we say it, but that we recommend that the rulemaking process, whatever it said there, that's what I think.
Okay. How about this then? And then the additional bullets are just, of course, additional feedback.
One of the things that I put on the sticky notes is that once a decision is made, if we don't have the opportunity to see all of this, not many providers are in a committee like this, like the one that we're doing right now, and we didn't have any vote on any decisions that they just made, like Susan was talking about the diaper changing area, and once those decisions are made, they don't put it out there to the public, you know, we're going to change this or we're going to do this. And the only way that providers are finding out is when the licensors coming into their homes and they tell them, oh, you're in non-compliance because this changed. But we never knew when that rule changed until they walked into our homes. And that's one of the things that we here, at least here in this area, we don't have that communication with DCYF or with the licensing department. They never communicate to providers that these rules have been changed. Please, you know, make sure that you are in compliance with this. So, and I don't know if you read the sticky note that I put out there.
I have not seen it yet, but I know that I will see it after. I hope you can all still see my screen up here with the recommendation. So
Yes.
I added in here, and Lorena, I'll take your sticky note once we get that review, and I'll kind of clean up this language to maybe better align with what it is that you had said. But I kind of grabbed it with more proactive transparency on how rules have been changed or what rules have
Change
been changed.
or put in place before they're mandated or something like that.
I feel like there's a lot of advocacy groups and we're trying to like make changes out there. But we don't really see any changes from DCYF part. And this is one, like Lorena was saying, that there's no communication. I feel like they just hear all that, but they don't make any changes. Even if we're making the effort, we're taking the time to be like in these meetings, and this is not the only one. I'm sure like all of us are in different groups and talking about the same things over and over, and still we don't see any changes.
Right.
So I don't know why, like in this recommendation, it says that we did not receive a presentation. We are not hearing anything from them. So like how can we change that? Should we put a time frame? Should we have like a leader to like get that information? I don't know. Like I don't have like other ideas on how we can get their attention or have someone that can clarify like all this stuff.
That's really good. Yeah. Are you, Alondra, are you maybe recommending that we put some time frame on this to maybe hold DCYF a little more accountable with actually providing this presentation and or update? For example, on the first bullet, you could say we recommend a presentation and update to Elac by a certain date.
I think we should at least
Yes.
before that day, and not just be like out there in the air, you know, just waiting or have us waiting for an answer or a change, and at least something, or expect something by a certain date.
How does the group feel about that?
I agree. We should have a date. Like let's say they start a rule like with a diaper changing area. We should hear about it, you know, within the next 1 or 2 months before they make a decision and after they make a decision, so that we are aware that these rules have been changed, so we know to be prepared.
I just want to jump in here just to make sure that the recommendations are written in a way that are consistent with how it actually works. And I would be a little hesitant to word it that way because, and again, this is just my opinion, so feel free to disagree, but there's kind of 2 prongs here. One is, as far as my understanding of the provider feedback versus what is available at DCYF, the process itself does allow for, and in fact mandate, a lot of what is already being asked by providers. But where the shortfall is that providers they don't know where to find that information, right? So like it's more of DCYF being a little more proactive in sharing this information and opportunities. I do not think that adding, I'm hesitant to do anything that would add an official requirement, like adding an additional step to the official rulemaking process to DCYF. One, I believe that would have to be legislative, because that is highly regulated. And B, to select a specific group like Elac and have them be provided a designated step, extra attention, extra opportunity to participate in this beyond what is provided to the general public, not only would that be difficult to add to the rules, because like I said, this is a legislative change, but I also don't think that would ever be approved. So I think that it's a reasonable ask, like what Colleen was saying, to say, hey, like, we would really like a commitment from DCYF to consistently engage, you know, Elac and provider supports on this. Like, I really like the idea of recommending like some sort of regular communication stream timeline, right? Like maybe incorporating it into the annual work plan to make sure that you guys are getting updates on these, something like that. But as far as saying DCYF has to notify this specific group of people about a rule change outside of the bounds of what is already mandated for them to share, which, you know, like I don't know how DCYF could possibly alter timelines, right? To make sure that we carve out this little bubble of time to make sure that this specific group of constituents gets special access and information before we move forward with the process, because the process is very formula, right? Like DCYF does not have the discretion to just decide to implement one of the petitions or reject one of the petitions, right? There's a process that it has to go through, and that process is public. So I hope that I'm not rambling too much, but I just want to kind of caution what is reasonable to ask and what makes sense within the context of the current process. Like, I think asking DCYF to commit to a certain level of engagement on this is totally fair. I think asking DCYF to petition the legislature to change the official rulemaking process in order to call out a specific group of constituents, I see that I see that being pretty impossible.
Thank you, Erin, for that information and clarification. But at least what the one that says more transparency and communication on rules that have changed before they are mandated, I think that should be more than enough, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's so annoying to have all these rules making and then not know about it, especially when you have language barriers. We totally understand each other, but there's other people that don't read English, and that's so frustrating to hear from providers. Our licensors asking for this, our licensors asking for that. When did that came in place? You know, how can I be in compliance with this? You know, I'm going to be written down, things like that. It's really, really bad to hear all of this from providers.
Yeah, and I've heard the same things, Lorena, totally agree. And I think what the second part of what you said, that makes a lot more sense, because I'm just trying to think of, from the agency perspective, how is the agency going to respond to these bullets, right?
Right.
And what they're going to say when they see that first bullet is, we have a newsletter specifically dealing with communications about rulemaking, where we proactively send out notification of every upcoming public comment opportunity, yada, yada, yada. So they're gonna say, okay, they're telling us to be more proactive in communication. Well, here we go, we're already doing that. Here's the newsletter, right? So that's what I'm thinking, is just because what we're hearing from providers is that is obviously not working. Not enough people know about the newsletter, or the newsletter is just not the right vehicle to be spreading this information, one of the two, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not kind of just putting things out there in a way where the agency is not going to have to come up with something for it, if that makes sense. They can easily just kind of say, yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
So then for clarification, Erin, so if there's only like 4 or 5 of these in a year, and then us asking if when they come in that let Elac be notified that this is happening, that's something we can't expect or ask for?
No, I think you can. I think you can, like, kind of what Colleen was saying is maybe having it be like just more of an integrated part of the feedback loop for ELAC meetings. That's something that I can do without the agency's support
Okay.
or help, right? Like I can just start doing that, making sure it's on the radar for ELAC. So I think that's fair. And I
Okay.
also think it's fair to ask for just more from the agency in that regard, but I would not go as far as to say ELAC needs to be notified of every petition within this deadline of the rulemaking process being initiated, and you know what I mean? So I think what you said is completely like within the bounds of what would work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
One other clarification, I thought what we meant by a time frame was when the step-by-step guide would be completed. But maybe that
okay.
isn't what was meant. Because I mean, that's some of the other problems is we have these things come out, but it's like it goes into the, you know, the black hole of everybody's bandwidth or whatever. So I mean, that step-by-step guide is actually really critical. And so it would be nice to know that there is a due date.
I think that's fair. I
Mhm.
see no issue with, yeah, that's very straightforward. It's like, here's what we're asking for, here's a resource we're asking for. We already know the agency has everything they need to produce this, right? So I think in that case, like, yeah, having a deadline, it makes a lot of sense.
Next question would be, what deadline are you comfortable with? How soon would you like this? And how soon would you expect DCYF to be able to produce this?
I guess my question is, you know, like, obviously the sooner the better, but what would be a reasonable, like, would by the end of the first quarter of 2023, which was that March 31st or whatever, or what's reasonable? I mean, like, I don't know what your work with by the end of December of 2022. I'm just, I don't know, what do people, I don't know what's possible.
I would say by the end of the year, that way we can start the year, you know, with new stuff.
So I don't think the report is going to be in the hands of the people, like it's not going to be submitted for, you know, final review until December. So I don't think end of year is doable if we're talking about end of this year. But if this report is going to be in the hands of the people who, you know, if it's going to be finalized and submitted in December, I think end of Q1 or, you know, end of Q1 or end of Q2 is probably what the target I would put on it.
Then I would say by the end of the first quarter, because if we give them time, I mean, we're not going anywhere.
March 31, 2023. I feel like that should be plenty of time for, especially since the guide is most likely, most of the elements may be already there. So, okay. Very good. So maybe just to circle back here now with some of the changes, I will give you all a moment here to review this recommendation. And if you can also review some of the feedback comments, placed it in there.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, you can.
Since all the elements are there for this, why does it have to be a recommendation? If we wanted to just ask for it, could that be done without having to have it even go through this report? I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just wondering, I'm asking the question. I mean, it's a need. It doesn't seem like it's, what's the barrier to just do it?
I'm going to default. Aaron, would you be able to maybe provide a bit of context to that?
Yeah, my initial thought is, yeah, why not both?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that for the rulemaking process, I know who to reach out to. And, I think that they had already started something like this because this is exactly what Elac and provider supports asked for. And like, they were kind of starting to work on that. And I think from what I remember, I think they did produce something. I'm trying to remember, but that would not also extend to the appeal process, right? So we would still need another deliverable from them. I'm not sure who I should bother for that, but I will poke around. I'll start with Travis and see what he thinks. But
Okay.
I think that it's worth having in the recommendations anyway. But to answer your question, Susan, I can absolutely start bugging people for that now.
Yeah, because I think there's a sense of urgency, and that way this December 3rd, we have March 31st through this process, but if we can check this off the list before then, that's all the better for everyone.
Yeah, such an easy win. It's doable. And I think it's a small thing DCYF can do to show some good faith here. So I completely agree.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And it would be really nice to have at least some deliverable to show for the hard work you guys have been doing, something, at least a quick win while we kind of wait for this to work its way through the system. So.
Thank you, I appreciate you taking a closer look into that.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy to include it here, and then also, further that conversation, at a grassroots level, I guess. Really good. Okay, so I have made a few little tweaks here to that top statement. I added recognizing the urgency, comma, the step-by-step guide should be available by March 31st, 2023. That'd be a good way to recognize the urgency on your end. Please take a moment through, and if you're comfortable with the language we have here, then you can give me a thumbs up. And once I've seen everybody is comfortable, then we can move forward on to the next. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Susan. How's everyone feeling with the rest of the content?
I have a quick question. When will
Yes.
these recommendations be submitted and to whom?
That is a fantastic question, Alondra. The process from here is I will finish up the recommendation report here, the draft, and then I am going to send that out to you and Elac and provider supports. We will give you until Monday morning, October 24th, to get your feedback and additional edits back to me. I will then curate all of that into the final report, which will be sent on to Public Affairs. Public Affairs has a few steps of review where they'll make sure that the report is formatted properly, getting it ready for public consumption. Of course, this is a draft, and I will watermark draft on this, so you're it's very clear that this just is a draft. That final recommendation report then will be sent to OFM will have a review, which I do believe will be possible based on timelines. And then ultimately the recommendation report is submitted to Secretary Hunter. The process from that point, I believe this is then submitted to the legislature as an actual recommendation report. The date for getting the report into Secretary Hunter's hands, I don't believe it's the legislative date, but that getting it to him is December 1st, 2022, which is why we have a shorter timeline. What we're trying to, of course, turn this over in. I will follow up and find out when that report actually is submitted to the legislature and, kind of what that process is from here. So I'll make sure that I follow up with the group and get a little more clarification for the after steps. I'm not 100% sure on that.
So it would be only these recommendations or the ones that we have been working on before in the last meetings as well, along with the provider rights.
Yeah, actually, that's a fantastic question, and even leads me into how we may want to fill the last hour of our meeting here. So we are scheduled to go to noon. We have gotten through the 3 recommendations that we set out to accomplish. We could end here. I could get all the notes, clarify all the edits made, and then I could get that report, the draft report, over to you a little quicker. Or we could spend the last hour here and we could maybe look at 1 or 2 of the recommendations. Maybe the rights and resources recommendation might be a good place to dive into. My only hesitation for doing that now in a live format is I haven't been involved in the curation of it up to this point, and I know obviously Emily and Deanna were, putting most of this together. And so, getting into that conversation on that particular recommendation, I would hate for it to go sideways and for it to, become something that just because I'm not understanding it, that maybe I, get off a little track with it. So does anyone have any suggestions? Or we could start at the beginning of the recommendation report and we could kind of slowly go through and you could see the recommendations and maybe provide some small pieces of edits and feedback there. And we can get as far as we can up until the noon hour. But I'm open to any of those. And so maybe I'll let it be open to the group how you'd like to proceed for the next hour.
Do we have another meeting before this thing is submitted?
We do not have another meeting before this is submitted. This will be submitted on Monday to Public Affairs.
Oh.
Yes.
Is there a way that you can send the Jamboard so that we can make some suggestions and read it on our free time or so before you guys submit it?
Absolutely, yes. I believe that the Jamboards, we can keep them open longer. Jess, are you able to answer that?
Yes, we can definitely keep the Jamboards open and send you the link in the follow-up email.
Okay, perfect. And Alondra, I'll make sure too that all the modifications we've made on the recommendations here, that's the exact language that's brought over into the Jamboard when we send it out again. And I think I cut somebody off. Susan, was that you?
What I was going to ask is, so if you sent what you're going to send to us is the full report that's supposed to be submitted on Monday?
Yes.
And then, so let's say we get the report, we all do some other comments or whatever to it, and we get this to you by when?
Monday morning. I'm open to, Monday at noon or Monday at 8. I just need to get this report submitted to the next step by end of day Monday. And we're probably about 30 days past of actually having done that. So we should have, that's the only reason for the real urgency here is trying to get this in.
So then could I suggest that if for those of us who, because I mean, I would like for the rest of the group to see what other suggested edits are being offered. And if we just send them straight to you at the last possible minute, no one else would see them but you.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, but I don't know what, I mean, I know this, I'm in ratio every single day and I have very limited time. So I'm doing work like this as I can.
Right.
Because
How about
it's so short. So, but I think that it's important that people see what people are offering is any changes, if any at all. So I'm wondering if we need to have a different timeline where we submit changes to you and then you get that back out to everybody so we can see what they are. And then that would be like our last iteration before Monday or something like that. I don't know how other people feel, but I'm not comfortable with giving feedback that nobody sees.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think there may be a few solutions. I send out the report at the, as early as I can today. And if you had till Friday, end of day to get all of your edits in, to where I roll in on Monday morning, I can take everything, get the draft re-updated, get it into a final version. I could then send it back out to the group and give you till end of day Monday. Or I mean, I could even ask if we, if it's end of day Monday, I don't anticipate if I sent it over on Tuesday, if that was, the end of the world, but I'll have to clarify if that's okay. But we could definitely do that. We could try to shorten the timeline for when you're all reviewing. You get all the edits back to me. I curate those edits into a final. I send it back out to the group, and then everyone can respond to that email and say, I approve, or you missed this, or something like that. And then we get an approval on your end before it's actually submitted to the next step. And I would open that to any feedback or suggestions on what would be best for the group, recognizing the shortness of all of this. It is about a 17-page document, and it's mostly bullets. So it's not like real heavy reading. I will go slow here. Actually, why don't I do that, and I'll scroll to the top just to kind of give you an idea. And actually, it's even with terms of recommendations, it's only about 12 pages of recommendations. So I'll get back over into here, and we've kind of broken them out into 4 major themes. And then you can see we're, I would say about 10 to 12 pages of recommendations. So for editing and reviewing, you'd have a little over 48 hours. I know it's not a whole lot of time, and I, of course, apologize for having to do this so quickly here at the end. But we can also try to go at the best speed we can, right? This is your report. And if this is the way that you want this process to go, then I think that has a lot of value in it. So maybe one of two options. If you'd like, we can finish up here in the next couple minutes. I can get this thing out to you very, very quickly. I have another meeting at 1. There's no reason why I couldn't get this cleaned up and resent out to you before that. Then I can give you all the way until Friday, end of day. Honestly, I'm not going to get it to anything till Monday morning at 8 a.m. So in theory, you can have till Monday morning, 8 a.m. I'll take all those edits in first thing and get the report then sent right back out and give everyone, like I said, maybe till end of day Monday, or I'll ask for just another day or two. And then maybe, end of day Tuesday, you're able to get that back to me for us to send on to the next step. Is everyone comfortable with that? And is that fairly clear on how we'll go from here? Thumbs up are okay with me. And if you have questions, please feel free to jump in for sure. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, I think we have a consensus now of how we're going to get this report finished up. So before we end, though, of course, we do have a exercise we'd like to go through. But even before that, I would like to find or ask the question, who would be the best person or member to give this report as a presentation to our December Elac? I don't know if it's something that obviously I believe the committee should be reporting. I don't know if you have somebody that's maybe here that would feel comfortable. But we would need this presentation, or wouldn't need it, but we would like to include this report presentation for the December 6th Elac.
I'll vote for Susan.
Votes work, nominations work, right? Susan, I know you're very, very busy. Please, if you're comfortable with that, you're more than welcome to say yes, or if not, then we can definitely find a better way, I think, to facilitate this.
What time is the, my concern is because of staffing, and I'm literally subbing in programs all over, so I'm hesitant to commit only from the standpoint of I don't know my availability. So that, if there's someone else who has more guaranteed scheduling freedom, that would probably be better. But what time is the next Elac meeting?
That's a great question. I'm going to let Erin answer that. She might have a quicker answer, but I do know that we could also schedule your presentation in a time slot that fits with your schedule. So I do believe that is an opportunity for us to do in the Elac agenda. Maybe Erin, you could clarify.
So the meeting is on December 6th, and we hold the time 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then sometimes we wrap earlier than that, but we try to remain within those boundaries. I would say, yeah, as of now, the timing for that is really flexible. I would advise probably best to fit this presentation somewhere between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. if possible, but that can be flexible if needed.
Yeah, that then I think we should definitely ask someone else to do it based on when I have to be in ratio.
I see. Okay. Is there a time of the day that would work really well for you? I guess in between 9 and 3.
More preferably, if it would have to be like at 11 or that, but no later than that, because that would, it would have to be as prescriptive as that for me to do it.
Okay. How about we can finish this conversation maybe offline?
Sure.
It sounds like we might have an opportunity to work that through. If not, we've got some time to find who would be a better fit to be able to give the presentation. We'll have I'll have the recommendations in a slide deck and all scripted out. And so it shouldn't really be too much of a heavy lift other than, just kind of reading through and sharing that passion of why these recommendations are so important.
Okay.
Okay, good. Then, so we'll leave that as undetermined at this point, and then we'll kind of work with you, Susan, on the back end and find if that works. And then if not, we might be hitting some of you others out to see if you would like to help. So with that, let me stop my screen share. And we would like to move into the last portion of today's meeting, which is a reflection of today's meeting. So Jess, if you could place the Mentimeter link in chat. And please share your feedback on this topic. As a reminder, when you click on this, you'll be taken to a Mentimeter outside, and just like you've done before. And I'll give you all a moment to reflect.
Eric, I would like to say if there's someone on this call right now who could I self-identify as a backup, I would feel more comfortable. Cause I mean, the kids come first. And so I'm just really, I would love it if someone else, Lorena, Alondra, or Colleen, or Bert, someone else.
You know, we do have a pretty small group on here.
Yeah.
We'll make sure to get that question out to the larger group.
Well, I just saw Alondra come off mute. Maybe she's volunteering.
Would it be like through Zoom or how?
Yes, it would be very similar to the format here. And we'd have a slide, a presentation for you that we'll take care of all of that. We'll operate the presentation, and really all you would really be doing is kind of facilitating the conversation by reading each recommendation, and then just presenting. And you'd have tons of support. We'd potentially even have somebody else, of course, from the committee that could essentially participate as well, which might alleviate some of the heavy lifting on your end. But you have tons of support if you would like to take that on.
I can do that too if she doesn't have time.
Oh, great.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Let's go with Alondra and Lorena, and then we don't have to worry about whether, because it's just so hard to know.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, thank you, Alondra and Lorena. We appreciate that. So we'll communicate them with you offline as far as nailing down a time and all that process. So no worries there. It looks like everyone has had a chance to fill out the Mentimeter. It looks like it was this was a great meeting. So thank you for going easy on me. My first time facilitating this, and I think we're just about there with getting this fantastic report sent off. So as you know, the follow from here, I'm going to get this draft report into your hands as quickly as possible within the next hour and 38 minutes. I will give you till Monday morning, 8 a.m. to get your edits and feedback back to me. I will then get a final report sent back out to the group. I would anticipate by the end of day, Monday, or even sooner. And then I'll work on getting a little extended time for you just to give me that approval. I don't anticipate it would be any longer than maybe Tuesday. But it might give you at least another day or so to just read back through the report, which hopefully won't have a whole lot of edits to it. So with that, thank you for your participation. Bless you all. Have a wonderful, what are we on, a Wednesday? So we will be in touch, and our next meeting is scheduled for November 9th. And I think at that point, we'll obviously be bringing back this recommendation report with some of the final elements, and hopefully we can get a little bigger group to provide some context to it. So thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.